Again, thanks for joining. If this is some of you, this might be your 17th hour of 24 hours of UX, in which case you know what's going on. If you're on the East Coast and it's 5 o'clock, you just got off of work and this is your first session, welcome. This is 24 hours of UX, nonstop, community-based UX sessions. This one is going to be brought to us from the Northern Virginia UX meetup, so we'll get to meet them in a little bit. A little bit of housekeeping. If you want to say hello in the chat where you're from, go ahead and do that. We will be monitoring the chat and putting in some of our own information. If you have questions for Alberto, use the Q&A. We'll get to Q&A at the end. And you can upvote things. If somebody else asks a really good question, then go ahead and upvote it. And otherwise, I think we can just go ahead and get started. So Jim, why don't you take us away and do the rest?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, Keith. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for NoVA UX's meetup session as part of 24 Hours of UX. My name is Jim Lane. I'm joined this evening by my fellow co-organizer, Jody Thomas, who you'll meet in a minute. For those who aren't familiar with our group, NoVA UX is a meetup group for UX professionals in the Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. metro areas. Although we have members join us from all over the place, we're really excited you could join us tonight. Our group's been hosting monthly talks and workshops since we founded it in 2012. And in fact, this month we're celebrating our 9th birthday, so we're delighted you all could celebrate with us. And before we start tonight's talk, a few details. As Keith mentioned, this is going to be recorded and will be posted afterwards. If you have any questions for Alberto this evening, we will do some Q&A at the end of the talk as much as we have time. So please post your questions in the chat channel. We will monitor it. And if you'd like to share your thoughts about social media, I will post our social media Twitter handles, and I will also post Alberto's website in the chat. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to Jody, who's going to introduce Alberto, and they're going to have a conversation. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. So I am thrilled to be able to chat with Alberto Silveira tonight. He is the author of a new book called Building and Managing High-Performance Distributed Teams. I had the privilege of working with him at a previous company. And I know for UX folks, you might be wondering, we've got a head of engineering talking to us tonight, but Alberto is an amazing advocate for design and empowering cross-discipline teams to come together. So super excited to chat with him and everybody here and to talk about the concepts in his book. So welcome, Alberto.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you for this warm welcome. I'm very pleased and happy to be here tonight talking with the UX community and to be talking about the book. And you're right, even though my background and my brain is a little bit more from the engineering side, I'm passionate about user experience. I'm passionate about human connections and people, and I believe that my book and what's in there can definitely add value to the community and for people that are building digital products. So very glad to be here, and thank you for creating this opportunity for me.
Absolutely. So maybe we can start with your book. You just wrote a book about distributed teams. That's a super huge topic right now for a lot of folks as we've been working remotely. So can you tell us just a little bit generally about the book and maybe some of the highlights of why people should take a look at it?
Sure. Well, let me answer that question saying what the book is not. This is not a book with a to-do list and how to work remote, right? I mean, after the world pandemic hit us, we all, in some shape or form, have been working remote. So this is not about which tool you should be using or details on that. Instead, and this is actually a very interesting topic, question, Jody, because if if I ask myself why I decided to write this book, I never thought that I would be able to write a book. And then when the pandemic hit, it was many people asking me, Alberto, how is your teams actually, in the middle of all this working so well? You should be writing a book about it. So, nice, sure, writing a book. Same week, another kind of like request, and then I decided, I think this is maybe a sign. I woke up one day and started actually writing. I never stopped writing. But the reality is, what the book brings is it's how to build high performance teams, and it does have like this new requirement that we are all feeling after the pandemic, which is like, how do we work in a distributed way? So. But it's not that the what's in the book is going to actually help just people to be operating during this after soon pandemic. It's actually a concept that's been for many years hidden behind the concept of like a centralized office. All this pandemic is been doing is actually accelerating a path that we've been already in, but it just comprised like many years into like a much short period of time. I think we're like 18 months or so in this with this new normal, how I like to say, and many people also like to say. But so the book will bring the human, the trust, the empowerment as the spine of a high performance team versus a centralized office. Like I like to refer as like the traditional mindset, where you need to see people to believe that they're actually producing something, right? I think it's proven that people can be very effective and teams can be very productive working in a decentralized environment. Of course, we cannot take the practice that is being in the centralized office model and believe that applying that will just actually work. There's like transformation, there's like change that needs to happen. So that's what the book brings. It's like, okay, so how should I think differently? How my leaders or my teams, how should I be leading? How product engineering and design should be collaborating together to better build the experience to users. So I also bring aspects of, let's start from the basic, right? Human communication. Can we speak the same language? We live in a globalized world. Everyone talks about remote. What's the difference, right, about remote and distributed? And now that people have those questions, so I bring that on the book. Offshore, is that the same thing? I said, okay, my goodness, let's write this down. Let's actually have common understanding in the definition. And once you have a definition, then we can actually establish a conversation. So other than definitions, I try to bring like some concepts and practices that really can drive teams towards to like what I call in the book North Star, but many companies refer, or many books refer as objective and key results or KPIs. Define those are super awesome, but how you make your teams to be aligned with that and sharing that same collective goal. So the book brings a little bit of that as well. But all in all, it's I'm not actually seeing my team every day in person, right? No one says that building a distributed teams that you should not be connecting as humans. I'm actually recognized by family and friends and coworkers how energy I like to put people together. I do believe that the foundation of like strong teams, it's connection, is the human connection. So going distributed and not seeing people in person are two separate things. And the book explains what are those things and how to actually create this mindset and put this practice in place that can allow teams or set teams to be successful on this new world. One thing for sure we can say and the book actually talks a lot about that, Jody, so we can wrap up like this question, is the way that it was before, that will that is, I have a really hard time to if that's the case, we as humans are failing. We need to learn something from it, and we need to adapt and change. So this book is meant for those that are willing to learn, are willing to make it better, adapt, and looking forward in a better way of doing things. That's what this book's about.
There's so much in there to chat about. I think, Alberto, one of the things that I didn't mention for our audience is the fact that we were working in educational technology when the pandemic hit. So there was no sort of resting. Schools were scrambling to make sure that they had digital experiences for their students and could move learning online. And I think you mentioned a lot around, the people and the human connection and making sure folks can continue to work together and have those bonds. And I think one of the things, and I'll sort of scooch back for folks, but we had a saying at the company, one team, one heart. And you mentioned this in your book. So I'm curious if you can talk about this concept of, the human connection and people and how that connects to high-performing teams.
Yes, and it's a very good question, and you're making me smile, not only for wearing the shirt, Jody, but also we are like in a UX audience, people from product, people from design, and many people. It's like the day-to-day of your job, Jody, as a leader in the design, is actually thinking about users, right? And I believe that I like to consider myself special. I'm not sure if everyone thinks that way, but I like to think that way. But engineering, it's also about the users. Otherwise, all we are doing is hitting the keyboard to build code for who? If we don't have users, there's no point of be hitting the keyboard. And the one team, one heart is a saying that I carry for like a long time in my life, honestly, right? It didn't come up in Schoology. It didn't came up with my passion for education. Where we work was my third ed tech company. I'm really passionate and believe in a better world throughout education, and I still believe. And but the one team, one heart is the spirit that connect teams and people with different specialties, with different disciplines, with like the idea of having that synergy that is not like engineering thinking on like fixing a tech debt, or like I've worked in places, Jody, that believe it or not, you have like a design roadmap, you have a product roadmap, and you have like an engineering roadmap. So you're laughing because probably you actually experienced that, and then in some companies. Mm-hmm. And what the book brings, and what I strongly believe, there is a need for us to change that perspective, because if we lose focus of the reason why you are building the product, that actually just I question like the purpose that we are there. So many companies treat contractors separately. Many companies treat, like segregate and create silos. The one team on heart is the idea of like you putting everyone together. Everyone is in the same boat. And as you probably noticed, like the book carries like one of my passions, which is boating. I think like the techniques of boating could be better used like building high performance teams, which is everyone together. We are like with the same destination, and otherwise the boat's gonna just spin and we won't get anywhere, and that won't be fun. So that's what the one team on heart is. I carry the one team on heart every company and every team that I build. It could be a soccer team that I'm building. It could be like teams and like an organizations that I am, and and people start liking because it's really good to be part of a team. So that's where I came from, Jody.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of the audience members can relate to when teams are moving in totally disparate directions and not aligned, and it causes chaos and sort of builds those silos.
Yeah, and we may talk about this in another question, Jody, but this one team, one heart, it is about, I mentioned about, it is the most classic one, is actually separate like what people may have access depending on like your hiring strategy. But I think it's like it brings like an aspect and doesn't depend on your gender, where you came from, your geographical location, right? It is about putting people together, regardless where you came from, or regardless who you are, kind of stuff.
Alberto, I wanted to circle back to something you said in the first question. So you sort of talked about distributed, remote. Obviously, it's very focused. You've used distributed in the book title. And I think a lot of folks maybe think of those as words that are interchangeable. So I'm curious if you can help us understand the potential distinction between remote and distributed.
Absolutely. That's, I guess, one of like the questions I get all the time, like, isn't remote distributed and vice versa? What's the difference, right? And I bring that definition in the book, Jody, because it's important to understand the definitions. So then we can speak the same language, and then we can actually work towards to where we want to get. So, and let me give you like an example. In our previous company where we worked together, we were like a company where we are like a traditional, where we had, that's how we started. We started with a centralized office, Midtown Manhattan, and people would have to commute every day, an hour, 2 hours. For those that like understand New York City, it's as any other big city. Commuting is chaotic. Very little on communication technology. Very people facing. You're like in the office. That means that I'm happy as a manager because you actually showing up. If you're working, that's a different story. Or if you're producing the results, then you have other techniques. But traditional model, we are all in a shape or form and all that. So Jody, we actually went from a centralized office to a remote culture, right? The remote means that many may refer as a hybrid kind of stuff. I will touch that in a second, but you have the flexibility. You already have the mindset where people, they are okay to work twice a week from home, take care of their children, or take care of and still be part of like the day-to-day work. But what happens is those that are remote, they miss some context because there's so much happening on the centralized office, and then they feel a little bit disconnected from that. Let me give you an example. How many of you have been in a situation where there's a conversation in the boardroom, and then there's like some folks on online or on the phone, and the presenter is pointing to the screen and no one actually can even follow? That is like one of like the challenge with the remote culture. The remote culture is kind of like the half and a half, but there's no the setup is not there. When we talk about distributed, distributed brings the one team, one heart part of it. If one is remote, everyone is remote. And when that happens with the one team, one heart on top of it, and a few other concepts, then we start to become distributed. And then you don't have like the side conversations, the siloed conversations, I should say, where many times when that happens, now you need meetings to get people on the same page. And then you need more meetings because you don't have the right audience. And when you realize, chaos. Now your calendar is full of meetings to catch up, and like, let's bring that up to speed. And so the distributed model comes with streamlined collaboration, streamlined communication, agreements, and all those kind of stuff to better set up the team for success. The book covers a lot of that, but the basic definition about distributed and remote, it's exactly that. You don't have like the mindset of like decentralized office, and you have like everyone using collaboration technology. It's not about just having Zoom. People are already actually tired of talking like the Zoom fatigue. It's not about that. Distributed is also about putting people together. Going distributed doesn't mean that teams cannot meet in person in whatever cadence works for them, to actually building the connections and then going back and feel part of it. So that is like the high level. There's more, Jody, but I think that's one of like the key differences that I would love to highlight to the audience today.
Yeah, I think you've talked a lot about people and human connections, and I think there's a really interesting thing for our design audience. In chapter 5 of your book, you sort of have this broken UX example that highlights what can happen when a team is out of balance. And you call out this balance and shared leadership in the book, and you call it the iron triangle. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the concept of the iron triangle for folks.
So happy that you have a copy, Jody. That's really good. Makes me smile. The iron triangle, right? And I think this is it is a spot on question for the audience. I've worked, and I mentioned this briefly in your previous question, Jody. The whole idea of like the iron triangle is to have like a shared leadership, right? If you have a shared leadership with different perspectives, and we empower those different angles, that's how we build a quality product. Without mentioning, let's not even talk about like age or how many times I've been building products. Otherwise, that would, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable. But I used like, operational systems back in the day, where you wouldn't even know which button to press, because the experience or the question is just like not connected with the user. So you would actually press cancel, and that actually would execute the action that you didn't expect. So how that can be possible, right? And I think there's this health tension when you connect product design, product and engineering with different perspectives, with equal agreement on the North Star. We can actually come up with better products. So I introduced the term of iron triangle, which explains the relationship of like three, and even like I like the rule of three. That's how I explain the book. Three, it brings a good balance. It brings even like a three legs stool can actually, adapt in any different situation. And I think product design and engineering, it is what many organizations lack, right? If you're like, if you go back tomorrow to office and to the office, or like to your virtual office, or like, or to your physical office, and you're building products and you're defining and talking about, we need to actually build this design system. Why? Because we want actually to, use the concept of Brandon Frost with like organisms and components and all those things, and now you have product which wants to actually go to market, and then now you have engineering trying to fix like a tech debt and all that kind of fun conversation, and you don't have a united roadmap. Guess what is gonna happen, right? Lots of context switch. Context switch, by the way, it's very expensive. So I'm a huge fan of one thing at a time. But having that perspective of shared leadership, that's what the Iron Triangle is. And if one chapter that I would say for if you're facing this kind of like challenge in your organization, chapter 5 is definitely like a chapter to go, because it connects marketing, it connects sales, it connects all the parts of the organization to product and engineering and product design. So having the product management as the which I talk on as the bow tie concept, as an extension of the iron triangle, which is like two triangles connected with product managing in between. So that's what the iron triangle is, Jody. When we work together, we did have that, and that's why we're able to build successful teams, I guess.
Huh. Well, and I think the analogy is going to be really similar. A lot of the folks in the UX community are probably familiar with that stool analogy of, when the stool is off balance and, it tips over because you don't have that perspective from all of the disciplines working together.
Yeah.
I think that you mentioned something earlier as well around, frankly, it's something that you used to say all the time when we worked together. Probably a million times I would hear Alberto say, baby steps, or you would talk about, it's continuous improvement. So I'm curious how that plays into, the things that you've written in the book and the structure of high-performing teams.
Jody, I'm a very repetitive person. In fact, there's chapter 13, if I'm not mistaken, talks about repetition is key.
That's probably another thing I heard you say a million times.
Yes. And also I read in a book that says that by the time that we actually get tiring saying is the time that people is starting getting it, right? So the continuous improvement and the baby steps is, I think by nature, we humans, we feel anxious of getting to the destination, right? I think if someone could create teletransportation, that would be fantastic, right? Because you can just be there. That's our dream of doing this kind of stuff. So, but the reality is, why we don't have that, I believe in small baby steps towards to the right direction. And that's how I've been able to build many times successful teams. It's about every win, right? It's not what I want yet, but it's definitely on the right direction. And when you have the one team on heart spirit and the mindset, and people will start to actually think and embrace that culture of the continuous improvement and baby steps, that's when boats start moving towards to the direction that leads us to the North Star, right? Many times in my career, and I've been doing this for many years, is several meetings, several different perspectives. Guess what? All valid points. But when you leave that meeting or you leave that session, okay, how can we move 1% better, which I like to also say baby steps. And that's what moves teams and organizations to be high performance, right? So that's what's behind these baby steps and continuous improvement. I say that for many years, way prior my daughter was born, and I think this allows people, which in general are like resistant to change, to give like a one step forward. So the book uses the baby steps continuous improvement. I use that several times when I'm actually working with my teams. And I think that's what lead companies to keep swimming forward. So I love baby steps continuous improvement. It's a good thing to take in life.
I think that segues as well into the idea of measurement. Everybody loves to measure. We want to know how we're doing. And in a traditional office environment for a manager, you can kind of get the pulse of your team and understand what's going on, whether it's the work or how the team is feeling or just what's going on around everyone. But I think a lot of folks start to feel that once you've gone distributed, it's a lot harder to gauge how things are going. And you outline this idea of the metric of mood. I'm curious if you can expand on that a bit more.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Metric of mood. But before I talk about that, Jody, I would say like you're absolutely correct. With the traditional mindset of like office-centric, there is the psychological safety of of the humans being together, and that's how we are collaborating, right? I heard many times that our ideas only come if we are like physically in a whiteboard. Questionable, but I think ideas comes from great people and synergy and the empowerment and the comfortable where they feel comfortable and share their ideas, right? You can have a very intimidating environment and people be in person, and I guarantee you that will not be productive. Even though many managers may hear what they want and they feel happy. That's the psychological safety. So, but I do agree. It's no questions that metrics is key. Like we live in a world of there's so much data, and transforming data into information, that is a not easy task, right? So measuring it is important. I've worked with organizations and leaders that are like so obsessed with metrics that they forget about the human side of it. So that defeats the purpose. Or there's so much metric that there's what we do with it, what improvements we do with it. So the first thing that I like and I say in the book is like, if you have metrics and you have no clear ways or expectations on how to improve from those metrics, I would suggest you pause and revisit what you're measuring. Because if you're measuring, you should be learning from it and improving from it, right? And that doesn't need to be overnight. You may be collecting metrics today to be actually be measuring at some point in the future. As long as you have that conscious decision, it's fine. What cannot happen is you're just measuring for the sake of measuring, and that is that's certainly not what's gonna drive you to your desired destination. So the metric of mood, right? When you're distributed, what is one of like the key elements or the main element? It's people. I mean, when you're building high performance teams, people is the most important thing. No questions about that. And then you have process, absolutely. You have tools, absolutely. But people is the most important thing, period. Who doesn't agree with that? We should revisit in what we are trying to achieve. But if people is the most important thing, it's important that we actually measure and we try to understand how the actions impact how people are motivated. Many leaders and managers underestimate how much motivated people can actually achieve. So if you have like individuals motivated, if you have a group of people motivated, your North Star is going to actually, become much closer if in case you don't have that. So I do love the idea of measuring the mood of people. There is technology for that. There is ways of doing that. And I combine the metric of mood of my teams individually and as a team with the other metrics. So for every action, there's a reaction, right? And when there's a reaction, I train my managers to actually understand what is causing that, so we can actually adapt as we move forward. And that's where that combined with the continuous improvement, because we should always be experimenting, trying new things. That comes a lot from the UX, right? But also that there's a lot in the engineering. So I think that spirit of like experimentation with the metrics and process and understanding how people are feeling, that all combined is what actually drives for high performance teams. So as you can see, Jody, there's a lot of is like high performance teams. I of course, there's a lot of like the distributed incorporated it, but it applies to the office as well, right? There's no reason why that wouldn't apply, even in a traditional mindset.
That's, I mean, I think just going back to, people, which has been, a constant theme throughout your book and the talk to this evening. I think one of the things that has really sort of fascinating as we've seen this shift towards distributed work, and obviously it's a rapid shift over the past year, and we've had pandemic challenges, obviously, but I think for a lot of people, it sort of highlighted this new reality of maybe it's work-life balance, maybe it's the ability to have a job that previously they weren't able to have in the past. And so I think in some ways it started to level the or create a more equal field. I'm curious to see if you see any link between this shift that we're going through and how that could link to a company's like larger diversity practices.
Absolutely. That's the short answer, Jody. It fascinates me when big corporations or like enterprise, they all talk about diversity and inclusion, and they require people to be in the office 5 days a week, right? I do have like really strong opinions, and I can share some with some with you. And I mentioned this in the book as well. In my career, I have not only acknowledged but prioritized diverse and inclusion in my teams. And think about this: like our office was like Midtown Manhattan, right? How many people with mobility issues would have the opportunity to work as an engineer or like a UX or like a product if they are required to get a job and interviewing face to face and be 5 days a week in the office? Now actually requiring people to be back in the office. So I think people contradict or get confused or don't understand the implications of it. I have hired people with mobility issues. I have hired people or young moms that just had prioritized family, which is one of the things that I will always support, but they don't have to give up of their careers because they cannot go to a centralized office. So I think diversity and inclusion, it is 100% connected with the new normal, right? And as I mentioned early in the conversation, we were like on that path already. The pandemic is just accelerating our path towards that direction. And I think this is something good. If there's anything about this pandemic, we should learn from it from many different angles and perspectives. And again, if we don't learn, we need to revisit our existing in this planet, right? So I think diversity and inclusion, it is what actually helps us to build better products, different perspectives. It's proven to help us to build better products. So I think I leave a question for the audience and for anyone out there is like, when you talk about diversity and inclusion and you actually force people to go back to the office, how does that actually play together? What do you say for like the young moms in my example, or people with mobility issues? Yeah, like the buildings are trying to adapt and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, us as society, We've been trying that for many decades, and we still far from where we need to be. So allowing distributed teams, you're allowing and motivating people from all different cultures, all different backgrounds to be part of it. This, for me, is what true diversity and inclusion actually means.
Well, I think that really segues to the next question, and I think something that's probably top of mind for a lot of our attendees, which is, a lot of companies right now are beginning to talk about whether it's like return to office, return to campus, whatever it is, whatever the language is your company is using. And I'm curious, do you have any advice as we think about for companies, leaders, or teams as they think about this sort of shift back to returning to the office?
Absolutely. Especially for product engineering and product design, right? Just for the context of the audience that we have here today, but it applies for many other careers. Can we agree on something, Jody? Great talent. It's really hard to find worldwide. This is not something that we have here in the US and the big centers and big cities across the world. So people realize that they can have great careers and also enjoy life. When we switched in our previous job from like a remote to distributed, it was so nice. I can actually, take my daughter to school, pick her up, and on the bus stop. Things that I would be, doing maybe once every 6 months. I made like my weekly routine. That time will never come back. For those that have kids, you know how fast they grow. So now imagine you actually going back to the office 5 days a week. That's going to be challenging. I think it's not about binary decisions, Jody. Right? I think there's a mindset, there's a culture, there's a process. The collaboration technologies out there. And again, I'm not just talking about video chat and Zoom. No. There's a much bigger ecosystem. Tools are important. Tools without processes, they're just loose tools, right? So when you connect technology, process, and people, you can afford to have people in different locations. So I personally think, and I posted something LinkedIn last week, what defines success and failures on this new normal is how long it takes for leaders to accept the fact that we will not go back to the way that it was. We will not. It's a 1% guarantee that we will not. You can deny that. It's up to you. If you're a leader and if you're like and you believe in that, and if you couldn't learn for the past 18 months, I think it's going to be really hard for you to learn going forward. So the question is, the team that you have, if you want that to be working high performance, you definitely need to revisit. There's a good book that talks about that. I recommend you to read. But I think that's the reality, Jody. I think there's a new normal, and we will not come back to the old. And there's a mindset, there's processes, there's technology that needs to shift and really consider people, not resources. Many times I hear like, oh, let's move 5 resources to that. Resources are computers, are like keyboards. Those are resources, you can call that. People is people, right? This new world, it's the center. It has to be human. Otherwise, I think we are actually moving backwards and how we are building society.
Well, Alberto, with that, I know we've got about a few minutes left. And Jim, I know you've been monitoring the questions that have been coming in.
I have. We have some great questions. We have 5. I'll run through them by upvotes. So just in case we run out of time, we'll let the voters decide. The first question is from Michael Stern, who's joining us from, it looks like New York, New Jersey area. Any tips for helping, something just changed. Any tips for helping change-resistant legacy organizations make this shift to a distributed model?
Absolutely, and thanks for the very good question. And I think I mentioned about the baby steps, right? If we try to make and transform a traditional organization overnight, it's hard to believe that everything happens overnight, but that's like the first thing, like baby steps. I think the first step is to acknowledge that it needs a transformation. It's to acknowledge that, back at the past 18 months, and many organizations already actually took a step forward, right? They were forced to take a step forward. So make a reevaluation of how that actually worked. Many things worked well. Many things maybe didn't work well. Look at the first 3 months of when you actually were on the pandemic, when everyone went to work from home. Maybe you were like working on like in the dining room table, and maybe you were like trying to understand how do I connect with my teammates, and like maybe look at how you are actually working right now. So I think trying to get the influence, trying to get educated about the topic, trying to actually understand the benefits. I just mentioned about diversity and inclusion, right? Take all that into consideration, and that's why I think what my book it's very timely and brings a lot of those perspectives. The book will not tell you exactly; it's not a how-to. It will guide you. It will inspire you on how to make those transformations. So, but short answer, Michael, right? I would say baby steps. Run a retro in your team. Run a retro in your department. Get key leaders to acknowledge the good things from the past 18 months and trying to actually replicate that in a cadence going forward. Like going back the way that it was might be, just shooting your own foot. So keep that in mind. And I'm happy to take questions offline. Jim, you also shared my website, crossingthetrader.com, also in my shirt. Also, I take the opportunity to thank my key supporters, Ubi Minds and teammood.com and ubiminds.com. Thank you very much for believing on what's written in this book. I really appreciate it. So what's the next question?
Next question is from Taryn, who I just got to meet the other day. Glad you could join us. She asks, what types of meeting practices, workshops, etc., do you think are effective in creating connection for remote teams? How do you balance those relationship building activities with work and get people to see the value?
Very good question. The hardest thing in life is actually to find a balance. So that is not an easy question to answer, right? Because you need to find a balance to where you can actually find the most effective way. So I do believe, I try just to give you like an example in my teams, at least once a year, but ideally 2, to have my teams together. Right, and my teams are all over US and South America, and we try to actually get connected, and that's where the connection happens. When we do those, we do like for 3 or 4 days. Like early in the year, we like to do the kickoff, where we get alignments in the North Star. We get people connect, and that is priceless. There's like those connections and that alignment. And Jody, I believe you actually were part of some. It is what actually really helps. There's like the counterbalance of that may say, oh, that is expensive financially. I would argue that that's what actually really moves the business forward. So of course, finding the balance, finding we're living like in a decentralized. You don't need actually to come to Manhattan anymore. You can find central places that works for everyone in a much more affordable way. And work is not only about hitting the keyboard and trying to be just doing tasks. A good product is built about these human and brilliant minds and the synergy. So I see that as an investment, but that's the kind of leader that I am. I see that as an investment. So it depends on how the leadership in the organization wants to see it. That's how you're gonna find the balance. So don't need to be every day, don't need to be every month, but I do once or twice a week, once or twice a year, and it works very well. Of course, if you have people in the same town, encourage them and empower them to get together in small groups, but it's important to have the whole group at least once together a year.
Great, thank you. I'm going to apologize in advance. I am probably going to mispronounce this name. Guilherme asks, what kind of hurdles do you foresee in applying the concepts in a big corporation, and what hints could you give to overcome those hurdles?
I think you pronounced the name very well, Jim. So
I got one.
Yeah, it's a very common name in Brazil and Portuguese countries, I would say. But I think large enterprise, the government, which is a large enterprise. I like to say what's the most bureaucratical company in the planet, and I would say the US government or the Brazilian government. As a Brazilian, I feel empowered to say that as well. And I think this is like large enterprise. They carry a lot of the traditional mindset, which results in the traditional mindset. This will not change overnight. Again, right? I think large organizations, my recommendation, and if you're a leader of like a large organization, start with pilots in smaller teams, but empower those teams to be successful, right? So if you're like if you're like a leader of like a large organization with like hundreds or thousands of people, empower departments and make them think about like, that's why I actually carry this in the boat, on the book, with each boat is a different team. What do we need for like a sailing boat to win a race? You need people with different perspectives, with different specialties, technical skills. So each boat needs to be self-sufficient to be driving towards to the North Star. So you can see like each one of those being like a team in a large organization. And that's what you try to change. And those learnings, you actually now pass to like another boat that will actually learn from all those techniques. And now you have another one. And when you realize you have a fleet now marching towards like a collective goal. So, but it starts with the baby steps. It starts small with the support of like the higher management. Otherwise, I've tried myself trying to change. You can change your boat, but if the large organization is not aligned, it's really hard. So try to figure out if that's aligned. If it's not aligned, I would suggest you get a new job before you actually waste too much time in life. I'm very blunt on that because life's too short to spend time where it's not worth it.
Let's try to let's try to swing one more quick one, Alberto, super fast. How has remote working evolved over the past year to become more inclusive of cultural and linguistic differences, which is no longer optional now?
Well, I think it accelerated, right, Jim? I think you can work from your hometown to anywhere in the world, right? Especially as a product, as an engineering or product design, you can do it. But I think we have to be very cautious about that as well. I see many companies just hiring people in another country and because they want to bring diversity and inclusion and all that. But I think we have to understand the law, the regulations in other countries. We have to understand the liability for us as a business actually doing such, right? So I think even though accelerating is being, I see with positive eyes, but I also see that it's not as simple. I think we live in a globalized world, which is amazing, which is great, but I think there's an opportunity for rethinking some of like the practice across countries, or even within a country. In the US, we're like each state has its own differences. So I think like the past 18 months has been positive in that regard. There's a lot to learn. I wrote literally a book trying to explain those things and making things and sharing my, because I've been building team, and I think this is actually important to say to the audience, I've been building teams and distributed teams for way prior pandemic. This is not like a new game for me, but and that's why I decided to share this knowledge, because I think people need to talk about it, need to learn, share experience, and then yes, we will have the opportunity to be building more diverse teams, but in a quote unquote safe way, without just going too fast and actually break some rules out there.
All right, fantastic. And I think we will go ahead and end it there. Thank you so much, Alberto. Please check out his book, Building and Managing High Performance Distributed Teams. This session is being recorded. We will post it. It'll be posted with the event as part of 24 Hours of UX. Next month's NoVA UX meetup will feature brand strategist and writer Elise Kamibayashi, who works at Viget, a digital agency in Falls Church, Virginia. She'll be talking about creating more effective and actionable user personas. And you can find that event at meetup.com/NoVAUX. If you are interested in giving a talk, organizing a panel, running a workshop, or some other idea, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We're always looking for speakers. And with that, thank you so much to the 24 Hours of UX team for helping us out. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jody. Thanks, Alberto. Right. So, so this was the end of hour 17, the keynote with Sophia on the 4 UX mistakes you don't know you are making should be starting in a minute or two. So see you at the next session. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.